Thank you, Venerable. Auspicious greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this month's Thanks Buddha, It's Friday Dharma Talk. Before we get started, please take a moment and check your microphone is muted and video is on to show our respect to our guest speaker. As a courtesy and Zoom etiquette, no eating or moving around. If you need to eat or move your device, simply go off video and then put back on when you are done eating or when you are back in one place. If you are joining us for the first time, please accept our wholehearted welcome and know that if you are unsure or have any questions about our topics, we are here to help. And if you are a regular, welcome back. We would love to get your feedback on tonight's events. Feedback on what you like or what we could do to improve our future's TBIFs. You can either message me directly or to everyone in the chat box provided. It is an honor to have our guest speaker, Venerable Hui Ze, to spend time with us tonight. Venerable Hui Ze will be sharing with us on the topic Buddhism, Medicine, and Health. Venerable Hui Ze is currently based in Los Angeles Zilai Temple with the Department of Social Education. We will have a Q&A sessions at the end of the evening around 7:50. But for now, let's put our hands together to welcome our guest speaker.
Okay, let me bring out my keynote. Okay, so I'm really happy to see a lot of our friends from around the world to be here today. And I'm also really glad that I've been invited to Thank Buddha, It's Friday. And I think I really like the title. I really like the name of this series. It seems like it's a way to get back at TGIF, and hopefully in the future we will see some vegetarian foods that might accompany with the talk, and when we come back in person, hopefully in the near future. So today I'll be sharing on the topic of Buddhism, medicine, and health. So to serve as the way to sort of think of a way to link the spirituality, the religious part of Buddhism, as well as the scientific and much more towards the medical part of medicine, especially modern medicine. So to start off with my sharing, I will quote a few things from the sutra. Because in the Buddhist Sutra, the Buddha had always used a lot of analogies that has a lot of connection towards healthcare and towards the field of medicine as well. So, for example, when we take the refuge, when we take the refuge in the Triple Gem, we will always be introduced the Buddha as the doctor, and the knowledge of the Dharma as the medicine, and the Sangha is the nursing staff, and all sentient beings are the patients. So this has a lot of connection towards the field of medicine as well. And at the first sermon of the Buddha, he had talked about the teaching of the Four Noble Truths. And from those Four Noble Truths, we can see the process of diagnosis, of learning about a symptom, of learning about what is the sickness. And the Buddha also works towards finding a cure for it. So for example, the first noble truth, which is suffering or dukkha. And dukkha is to know about the sickness, that is to diagnose what is the sickness. And the second is samudaya, or the cause of suffering. And the cause of suffering is to really go deep and to understand what are the things that causes all the symptoms. Do we eat our diet in an appropriate way? Do we take too much substance that are harming ourselves, and etc.? So we are looking deeper into the cause of the sickness. And from Buddhism, we know that the causes is actually the three poisons. And the word poison itself is also very relevant in especially in medicine as well. And we know the three poisons are greed, hatred, and ignorance. Those are the three poisons that are causing all this suffering. And the third noble truth is that the Buddha tells us there is a way to find this cure. There is a cure for this. So there'll be Nirodha, the path, not actually the path, but a way to be able to find the cessation, the stopping or the elimination of the suffering. So in a sense, we aspire to the cure as well. And the fourth will be the path or marga, which is relying upon a medical treatment. And in the medical field, it's what we always say: listen to the doctor, eat your medicine, follow through with your course. Then eventually we will be able to come to a better health. So we can see a lot of the connection and the deep relationship between the Buddhist teaching as well as in the terms of medicine as well. So in Buddhism, whenever we talked about healing, we talk about medicine, most of the time the first thing or the first person or the first Buddha that will pop up is the medicine Buddha. And medicine Buddha in Sanskrit, he's called the Vaisajya Guru, or literally translated to be the medicine Buddha, or the Buddha that provides healing. So he is widely known in Mahayana Buddhism, or the Buddhism that we see in our temples in Foguangshan, as the Buddha of healing. So his statue, if everyone can have a closer look to this statue, he has in one of his hands, that will be his left hand, holding a jar that is actually a medicine jar or a gallipot, and he's distributing the medicine using his right hand. And offering of the medicine is also been done by using the Abaya Mudra, or the fearless gesture. And in Buddhism, the fearless gesture signifies the offering of fearlessness. So in a sense, by giving people medicine is also in a way to give them peace of mind and let them be able to be at ease. So that is also an offering of fearlessness, because we know that there are three kinds of offering. The offering of material goods, that is the first offering, or offering of wealth. Some may say that. The second will be the offering of Dharma, which is to share the teaching. And the third kind is the offering or giving of fearlessness. So by practicing medicine or providing medical care, is actually a form of fearless offering as well. So the Buddha himself, he had also said in the sutra, had actually been described in the sutra as the ultimate physician. So he has been called the Great Lord of Healing, or here in Chinese, 大医王. So he's an ultimate physician that could provide medicine to cure not just the physical body of humans, but also our mental illness, as well as we have seen in the example of the Four Noble Truths. It is following the classical method or the mathematical model of diagnosis, cause, and cure, and eventually come up with a treatment. So as you can see here, diagnosis is the suffering, the cause of suffering, cure is the cessation of suffering, and treatment is the path. So it has been laid out here, and this is also being considered the classical methods in the medical field as well. And so the Buddhists see that the physician's role to be a vital one, because within the early Sangha, he also had made an aspiration to tend towards those that are sick. So he himself tend towards the sick, and he also tell others, those who tend to the sick are of great benefits. And he had mentioned that nursing the sick should be was much praised by the great compassionate one, or the Buddha himself. And it is, and he also say, for the sage sees the welfare of others as his own, and thus he should act as a benefactor in such a way. So this is why the Buddha feels that attending to the sick should be much praised of. So as you can see here in this picture over here, the Buddha is tending towards an elderly monk, and some of the other monks might be looking across the door, and they might feel another way. But the Buddha really felt that nursing the sick is one of the field of merits that should be praised upon. Sorry, okay. So that led us into the current challenges that we are facing in this pandemic. And I believe that during the start of the pandemic, we are all very worried about what will be happening. Will our lives be changed in a drastic way, in a dramatic way? And from all the numbers that have been gathered, we're actually seeing that COVID, especially at the current development of the COVID-19 pandemic, everything is starting to stabilize, although we are still seeing a spike here in the United States, but more or less the vaccination had made the COVID-19 pandemic to be in check. As you can see here in the numbers of the 2020, this is the list of the leading causes of death. As you can see, at the height of the pandemic in 2020, the first leading cause of death here in the US, it is still heart disease. And the second is, more or less the much more popular one in the modern days, cancer. And the third one, and it's still following at a very small number. At the third is COVID-19. So we can see, although most of us are predominantly concerned about COVID-19 at the moment, but we still see that the causes of our suffering is still somewhat unchanged in this way. People still suffer a lot from heart disease and cancer, and COVID-19, although a very predominant source of our suffering at the moment, it seems so little compared to the major concerns of heart disease and cancer. And also in other countries, especially in Japan, where the workspace is much more higher in terms of the stress levels, we see more young people actually succumb to suicide rather than die from COVID-19 itself. And also during the start of pandemic, especially from what we see here in the States, there's a heightened level of racial discrimination. So you see a lot of hate crimes that happen. And luckily, we see less of it nowadays. And hopefully that through the propagation of Buddhism and the propagation of the teaching of the Buddha, we can alleviate some of the suffering that we are all facing, especially when we are coming out of this pandemic. So that comes to the question of our body. Is our body separate from our mind? From the perspective of, is the physical separate from the mental? So over here you can see, well, we always tend to see all our body systems, such as our bones and our blood, our muscles to be our body, and our brain seems to be of another part, which is the mind. But for the Buddha, he actually teaches us that the body and the mind is actually one and the same, but what in his word is actually not one, yet not separate. So it's actually interconnected closely between each other. And from the teaching of the five skandhas, we can see this very clearly, because the five skandhas is, or the five aggregates, or in other translation, it might be from the translation of Dr. Lancaster from US. He actually felt that the five aspects of human experience is much more relevant, a better translation for the five skandhas. For in the five skandhas, we see the physical part of this being, of our being, is just 1/5 of it. It has been mentioned in the first of the skandhas, the forms, that is consists of our body. Our physical body will actually lead towards the feelings, because all of our sensory organ, when we are in contact with the external world, it will create a certain feeling. And from there, from our feeling, we will come up with a certain perception with the situation that we're in. Whether we feel happy, we will have a perception, oh, this is actually a good experience for me. If we feel sad or we feel angry about it, we might reject the whole situation at all. And that will come in the third skandha, that is perception. The fourth is formation, or in some way, in some translation, mental formation or volition. That is when we have a certain fixed concept about a certain situation or a certain object, we will have a response towards it, whether that is a physical response, whether we will do something to hurt or other people, or do we say something that is hurtful, or maybe it's just within our mind, we think about it. So when you look at the mental formation, maybe not just mental formation, but volition, it is both physical and mental. It works at both sides and at the same time as well. And this all goes within our consciousness, which consists of all the accumulated experience that we have. And that is where our karma is. And that is actually that makes us who we are. So by widening the concept of healing, and in this way, we will be able to widen in our concept of the sense of who we are. Of who we are is not just about this body. It's not just the continuation of our well-being, the continuation of our body, but how can we be able to relieve ourselves of the suffering. And for the Buddha, it's also how we can liberate ourselves from this process of continually come into contact with the things that we continually hurt ourselves and suffer as a result of it. So if we are the body and the thoughts, feeling, and memories associated with it, or this being, this self, then we'll want to preserve the body at all costs. And thus, ordinary healing will be utmost importance if we see it in that way, if we see the body as the whole existence of this self, we will definitely focus on it. But there is another level of healing that we can say that it is the transcendental way of looking at healing. That is, how can we heal of our mind, of our greed, hatred, and ignorance. So for the Buddha, upon his enlightenment, he actually affirmed and said these words that all sentient beings have the Tathagata, or the Buddha's wisdom and virtue, but they fail only in realizing it because they cling towards this deluded thoughts and attachments. So the path to purify all these defilements and enabling the luminous mind to shine forth unobstructed should be of utmost importance. And the mind-only school of the Mahayana Buddhism also says that there is so much teaching about the nature of this mind, and there are deep meditation practice to be able to help us, guide us to it insofar as it is possible, but we also need to put in all the effort to be able to practice and reach the point where the Buddha had reached himself, and we will need to really put on our efforts and to aspire to it. And so this comes to our next question. So we know about the symptoms, we know of our suffering, the cause of our suffering. Then what is the solution? What is the prescription? What is the medicine or the course that we need to take to be able to reach this point where the Buddha had achieved to attain towards and had left all these teachings and the hints for us? So the solutions actually exist all around us, especially when we're talking about the Tripitaka, the Buddha's canons, 12 parts of the sutras. All of the things that have been mentioned in the sutras are all skillful means that will provide us with different ways that we can be able to approach this solution, to be able to approach this liberation ourselves. So take for example, because we're talking about this connection, this relationship between the body and the mind. So in this sutra, it is been mentioned by the Buddha. The Buddha is using the analogy of a person being struck by an arrow, and how can you avoid being struck by the second arrow? How you can alleviate or totally avoid that? So the Buddha said, when touched with a feeling of pain, and you can imagine that as a physical pain, a pain that really exists, that you can actually feel it. The ordinary uninstructed person, in this case, the Buddha is talking about someone that has not learned Buddhism, sorrows, grieves, and laments, beat his breast and become distraught. So when you've been hit with this pain or this first arrow, that is a very normal reaction. Anyone will have this reaction, especially when someone is faced with pain of illness and it's on hospital bed and is suffering, going through all this suffering. So for an instructed person, he actually feels two pain. One, a physical one, and the second, a mental one. So just as if they were to shoot a man with an arrow, and right afterwards were to shoot him with a second one. So this is the kind of pain that he will feel, the pain of two arrows. But for an instructed person, in this case, the Buddha is actually talking about the enlightened disciples of the Buddha. In this case, will be arhats, enlightened beings. An instructed person will feel the same first arrow, as in when you're living in this world, you will still be suffering towards all this illness, all this pain, whether it's a physical harm that comes from another person, they will still feel that. But an instructed person, an enlightened person, won't feel the second arrow or the mental pain, because he is able to be mindful when the first arrow actually struck. When the first arrow struck, he will go through the same process of having me mindful of this form, be mindful of the feeling that he goes through, but he doesn't come to the point of having this perception of this arrow striking me and starting to ask the question of why me? Why I'm the person that needs to go through this process? Why I'm suffering this? He's able to be mindful of that and thus be able to be alleviate and not to come to a response and starting on the process of the mental pain. So for an uninstructed person, there's two arrows that will struck him. First, a physical one, and second, a mental one, that it actually comes from the response, his own response towards that pain, which is most of the time being a negative one. But for an instructed person or an enlightened person in Buddhism, he will be struck with a physical pain, but there are ways to alleviate or actually avoid the second pain, which is the mental pain, which in this story is the second arrow. So that is one of the case of how the Buddha actually tells us of how we can be able to go through pain and suffering, not just physical one, but mental one as well, because we're always struck with the second arrow time and time again when we think about ourselves, when we come into a dispute with another person, we have an argument, we are mad at the other person. It might be a few years ago, but we are continuing striking ourselves with the second arrow, a third arrow, fourth arrow, and etc. And it goes on because we are always responding towards the negativity of the event. And it happens again and again and again. And this is actually how the cycle of samsara actually happens. It always comes again and again and again. And it's not from an external force, it's actually from an internal one that we inevitably and unknowingly doing it to ourselves again and again. And for the second part that I would like to talk about is about healthcare ethics. And I think this has more to do with healthcare professionals, because in the sutra, besides the Buddha instructing ourselves of how to alleviate our pain, as in the perspective of a patient, the Buddha also have a lot of instruction towards how we should be going about doing our job as a healthcare professional, for example, doctors, nurse, and other professionals in the field. For example, the Sutra of Buddha's Diagnosis, in the sutra, the Buddha explains that a doctor should progress through the 4 steps when helping a patient. So the first one is a doctor should discover the origin of the illness. So almost the same as the Four Noble Truths, you discover the cause of it. And the second is to achieve a thorough understanding of the illness, that is to look through it and really find the root of it. Third is to prescribe the appropriate medication and to cure the illness. And the fourth is to completely cure the illness in a manner that prevents it from reoccurring. In addition to mastering these four criteria, a good doctor should always act in a generous heart as well. Because I think ultimately, what that really cures a person is the compassion of your really being there and to really feel in a way that you really care and you really know what they're going through. As in a way, that is what the word compassion is about, to feel the same suffering as the other person. So when we are really being compassionate, we are able to put ourselves in their shoes and really going through the same process as though you're suffering from the same illness as well. So in this sense, we really need to look at the work of a doctor or a healthcare personnel as in someone that provides care and also to give the giving of fearlessness. And in the Pali version of the Buddhist medical oath, or Vajjavatapada, this is actually compiled by a Sri Lankan monk. This is kind of like the Buddhist version of what you call the Hippocratic Oath in Western medicine. And in the Buddhist version, it is said that the Lord said, health is the greatest gain. He also said he would minister to me, should anyone who minister to the Buddha should minister to the sick. So the Buddha thinks that health is the greatest gain, and a medical personnel should minister to the Buddha as to the patient as though he's ministering to the Buddha himself. And therefore, he will use his skill to restore the health of all beings with sympathy, compassion, and heedfulness. And he'll be able to prepare medicine well. He will know what medicine is suitable or what is not. And he will not give the unsuitable, only the suitable. And to minister to the sick with a mind of love, not out of desire or gain, or in this sense, actually it's greed. And then he or she will remain unmoved when have to deal with stools, urine, vomit, and spittle. I think up to E, we can all agree that this is universally true, whether you're a Buddhist, you're a Christian, it will be universally true for anyone that practices medicine. But from F to G, it is more or less another level that we should be thinking about it in a way of how a Buddhist should approach medicine. From time to time, we will be able to instruct, inspire, enthuse, cheer the sick with the teaching. So in this sense, it is actually not just giving the gift of fearlessness, but also the gift of Dharma as well. When someone is sick and facing the end of their lives, they need more than just medical care. They need a guidance towards what will happen to him. What does he need to do to be able to look forward towards the future? So we need to guide them from the perspective of Buddhism, of a perspective of Buddha's teaching as well. And the final one is, even if I cannot heal a patient with the proper diet, proper medicine, and proper nursing, I will still minister to him out of compassion. So this will be in a sense of end-of-life care, as in all the medical effort has been done, all of the possible ways have been prescribed, but still a person might not be able to fully heal, and they will still be faced with the challenges of the end of their life. So in this sense, out of compassion, we need to think about more in terms of palliative care. How can we let him or her be able to go through the process of the end of their life in the most comfortable and the most dignified way possible? So I think in this Buddhist medical oath, we can see that there are actually some of the teaching of the Buddha within this that actually teaches us that we need to look past the physical aspects of medical care. We need to look towards a higher, in a sense, spiritual care, as well as how do we ultimately approach the care that we give towards our patient, towards a person. And so, sorry, I think there are more things that have been mentioned by our founder, Venerable Master Xing Yun, as well. And because he's always thinking of Buddhism or the Buddhist teaching in a way that we can approach it in our daily life. So in this sense, this poem that he had composed is actually more like a Chinese medicine prescription that you will see when a Chinese physician will hand to you, and you will go into a Chinese medicine parlor to pick all the Chinese herbs to be able to prepare it at your home. So over here, the Venerable Master mentioned that the recipe for you to have a healthy mind is one strand of compassionate heart, one slice of morality, a pinch of cherishing good fortune, 3 portions of gratitude and appreciation, a complete package of sincere words and action, 1 piece of observation of precepts and upholding the Dharma, and finally use self-discipline and truth to calm the troubled mind. If you can do this, all ills will disappear. So in a sense, the Venerable Master is seeing that in a way that a lot of our physical illness is actually stemming from the mental illness that we have. And if we are able to calm our troubled mind, then we will be able to control or being able to manage with the physical pain or the physical illness that we go through. And in a sense, it also goes back into the Buddha story of the 2 arrows. When we are struck with the first arrow, for example, we might face with a disease, and we will suffer from this physical pain. But how do we deal with the second arrow of the mental pain that follows it, that will actually really drains ourselves and really put ourselves into a negative path? So this is a way that we can look at it, as in we can use a positive mind to be able to deal with the physical challenges that we might face. And this poem is actually in one of the booklet. I believe it's also the same name as the title that I used for today's talk, Buddhism, Medicine, and Health. It's in one of the section over there. So if you're interested, you can look into the booklet, which you can download from the Fo Guangshan International Translation Center website. I believe it's in a PDF format. So if you're interested, you can have a look at it. And I think finally, I would like to do a prayer by our Venerable Master, because I feel that for the doctors, nurses, and healthcare professionals, they're really doing a great job, and they have been the first responders, the frontline workers in this whole pandemic. And I've actually heard personally from a lot of our devotees, and especially from one of our retreats, we hear a lot of the people working in healthcare and medicine are actually going through a lot of burnouts, a lot of stress, because it is as if this pandemic is not coming to an end. There is almost no light at the end of the tunnel. But I hope that this prayer will give a little bit of consolence, a little bit of alleviation towards the work that you're doing. And it's also a way to show our gratitude towards all the efforts that you have done. So please join us in this prayer for the healthcare professionals. O great compassionate Buddha, most people in this world suffer torment from some illness. Some suffer the physical illnesses of old age, sickness, and death. Some suffer mentally through weaknesses of greed, anger, and ignorance. Only you, Buddha, are the world's great doctor. You are able to help people not only recover physically, but also to help them heal mentally. Furthermore, you encourage us to tend to the sick. You once told us of the 8 fields of merits. Tending to the sick is the greatest. You also encourage outstanding nursing professionals, first, not to be deterred by foul smells. Second, to treat the sick with attentiveness. Third, to dispense medicine. Fourth, to be adept at preaching the Dharma. And indeed, since ancient times, these are the goals that healthcare professionals have pursued. O great compassionate Buddha, many healthcare professionals have followed in your footsteps. Your uplifting and efficient figures shuttled back and forth, deftly between sickbeds, hoping only to bring comfort to patients. They toil day and night to care for patients, wishing only to ensure your rapid recovery. Healthcare professionals work irregular hours. They even risk the possibility of infection and sacrifice time with their families. After a full day of making rounds and inspecting wards, their leg muscles often ache from fatigue. After a full day of performing surgical operations, they are often about to collapse from exhaustion. We pray to you, Buddha, to support and protect healthcare professionals. May they be able to have strong and healthy bodies. May they be able to have perfect medical skills. May their family appreciate their hard work. May their relatives and friends support their ideals. O great compassionate Buddha, we would like to pray for healthcare professionals. May they persevere and carry out everything without obstacles. May they always smile and have their wishes fulfilled. May they be compassionate and wise and help patients to have quick recoveries. May they be mindful of their own health and stay well both physically and mentally. O great compassionate Buddha, please accept our sincerest prayer. O great compassionate Buddha, please accept our sincerest prayer. Okay, so that would be the end of my sharing. And I'm seeing some messages that have been left in the chat box. Okay, so I think we will start off with our next part, which is, I believe there's still a bit more of time for the Q&A. So the first question is from Marissa. So if we know our second arrow, how do we avoid it? Break the habit, also how to acknowledge the second, third arrow, but being able to let go of that arrow instead of suppressing the feeling. That would be a really good question. Sorry. I think when I was sharing the story of the Buddha, the story of this two arrow, the main question that will come to mind is how can we be mindful of the first arrow to start off in the first place? So I think the best suggestion, the best recommendation is that we should go on the practice of mindfulness. For example, if you are staying near to one of our branch temples, I would strongly recommend that you go to one of our retreats. That will be one of the ways that we can start, because I think the only way that we can be able to be aware of the first arrow and really catch it before the second arrow actually struck is that we need to train ourselves in the field, in the aspect of mindfulness. Because in the free learnings of Buddhism, or the free practices of Buddhism, there are 3 stages. The first will be the learning of precept. That is when we take the refuge, when we take the precepts. That is when we know what are our limits, what are the things that we should do and what are the things that we shouldn't do. So that is almost like a prevention method that really stops you from really going back into the painful spots where you will hurt yourself again and again. So this is the first learning of precept. The second learning is actually of mindfulness. And the learning of mindfulness is to actually stop the suffering before it even struck. Like, for example, in precept, we know that maybe we already hurt ourselves the first time. And at the second time, we know that there's pain, or we might get hurt over there at that certain place, and we will avoid it. So upholding precept is almost a kind of avoidance, that we know that there's pain and suffering over there, so we avoid it completely. But through mindfulness, it's not much about avoidance, but it's more about awareness of when we are aware when something struck us, or actually just come into contact with a certain subject of a certain thing that affects us emotionally, we will be mindful about it. For example, when somebody said something hurtful to you, or it's something that is something that is really negative towards you, you will start to be mindful about it and really see it as what it is. It is a verbal action towards you. It consists of sound. It has a few words, and those words might mean something to you, or it might not make sense of you towards you, but it has a lot of emotion. And when you start to react towards those emotions, then that is where you will get caught up, and that is where the second arrow will strike. So a lot of the work of mindfulness, of this practice of mindfulness, is to be able to be aware of when the suffering is about to start, as in you will stop it before it actually happens, before all the emotions just got out of control and you just spiral into all the negativities, instead of having all your emotions, all your thoughts in check and be really clear about it. So I think a lot of the training, especially in Buddhism, in meditation, is just that. It's just training yourself in these retreats, training yourself in all these long sessions of sitting meditation, but to utilize it in your daily life when you are going through all these things that will affect you emotionally. So not much about suppressing it, because like what I mentioned, it's not about avoidance. It's more about being aware. And if we are being able to be aware and be mindful of it, that's the second stage, we are able to come through towards the third stage. That is, we are able to develop intrinsic wisdom within. And from there, we are able to be mindful and know how to deal with it in a constructive way, in a positive way, in a productive way, that we are able to build from it, rather than to be hurt from it instead. So, yep, that will be the answer for the first question. And second, also a comment by Marisa herself. As a doctor myself, how do I remain empathetic but not get to empathy burnout? I think, first of all, we need to accept that the 4 stages of life, as has been that's mentioned by the Buddha: birth, old age, sickness, and death, is a natural process that we all will go through. And I think to ultimately care for our patients or for our loved ones is to be able to care for them in the sense of how can we lead them towards liberation, towards alleviating the suffering, towards being liberated from this second arrow, from this mental pain that they will suffer. So the only way that we can lead them towards that is through the teaching, to let them know that there is a way that we don't have to suffer mentally. So by leading them towards down that path, and ultimately, hopefully, that they will be able to achieve the same achievement as the Buddha, to be ultimately enlightened and liberated from all the suffering, then that is the best thing that we can do to them, for them, not just to help them alleviate the pain of their body. I mean, we can give them all the anesthetic and all the medicine that you can give, and they'll just feel like okay, but it is not enough. How can we lead them towards the path of liberation? So I think in the context of Buddhism, that is the bigger question, or the bigger concern or focus that we should put ourselves on. So empathy burnout. I actually see that firsthand because my brother is a doctor as well, practicing a physician, and it is on the deathbed of my grandpa that I see him really going through the suffering, as in he's really pounding the wall, and he's really feeling that he's so helpless that he couldn't do anything at that moment but to see our grandparent just fade away. But well, I actually told him, don't do that. Just go to the restroom and deal with it. It's not good to do that in front of a patient or of our grandpa. The best thing that we can do is to help him mentally. That is what we are doing. We're chanting the Buddha's name. We're calming him down. We're telling there is a pure land, and you can aspire and vow to go there. So chant with us and just bring his mind out of the place of suffering he's in at the moment, not to think too much about that, but just to really look forward of a future of actually finding a solution towards that. And well, there's a lot of questions. Also, how to not feel fatigued after a whole day of work, trying to keep on time, taking care of each other patient the best I can. I think ultimately that will really depend on your workplace. If they really plan for the time for you to recuperate, to rest, or if you're able to really have a feedback towards your superior, towards your employer, or maybe if there's a union that could help you out, because I think ultimately the kind of challenges that you go through in the workplace rather than with the patient is that you really need to communicate with the people that are around you in the workplace, so that you are able to help each other out and to make a much more positive environment for yourself and the patient as well. Because if you're tired, you're unable to tend to your patients, then that's when you're unable to do your job well. And the final one, not to feel the dukkha of helplessness when not able to help. Like what I've mentioned, the ultimate care that we can give towards another person is to really lead them towards the path of liberation, to ultimately be able to alleviate this not just physical suffering, but also the mental one. And also from Dean, unfortunately, in our American corporate medical system, profits are often placed above compassion, as which is unavoidable, given that we are in a capitalist system. Even if the doctor desires to serve their assigned quotas of drugs and procedures, that they must charge for. So unfortunately, there are a lot of challenges, but I think if we are able, communication is still the key, that we communicate towards people that are able to help in the process of change, and also people that are willing to change as well. So, yeah. And yeah, Marisa agrees on that as well. Yeah, I think probably we can form a reading group of people that are serving in the medical field, so that you can kind of come together and really voice out all the challenges that you face and kind of support each other out in the way of Buddhism, because I think the best way that we can view our community is a sangha. And this is what a sangha is about. It's to support each other with, to be the nursing staff of each other, and to really find this medicine that the Buddha had gave us. So yeah, I think basically, I think my time is up. So I don't know if there's any more questions or feedback that anyone would like to share. Yeah. So have I had all the question answered for Marisa and for Dean? Hopefully I've answered your question.
Venerable, there's one more comment from Kitty Huang.
So, okay. From Kitty, how do we control our emotions when we are doing nothing wrong and others are determined to get in trouble? Wow. I think a way that we can see it is through compassion as well, as in there are so much people that are willingly get into trouble and start off with their process of suffering, as in if you view it in the perspective, in the lens of karma, these people are willingly subject themselves towards a negative karma, a bad karma. So in a way, we should be compassionate towards them, and not to feel that, not to feel offended from them, but to see them in a compassionate, through compassionate eyes, that they don't do this. They don't do this willingly or actually do this mindfully. They do this out of their emotions or whatsoever. But we will always be compassionate towards them, and to really think of a way how to stop their cycle of suffering as well, how to stop this cycle of suffering. Although you're at the receiving end of that, but it is still important that we can be compassionate about it and really think of ultimate how to help the other person of stopping this cycle and alleviating their mental suffering as well. So hopefully I have all the questions answered. If you like to voice your question, this will be your last chance, because I'm so over time already.
I would like to present an anecdote from a dear friend of mine who's in the hospital with cancer right now. A couple of weeks ago, she was in the hospital, and the staff came to her room, and their intention was to subtly explain to her that she was not going to survive and she was dying. But they came in and they asked, "Is there anything that we can do for you?" And she said, "You can smile more and be kind to everybody that you meet.
Yeah, I think that is really beautiful. I think this is something that we can all achieve, that we can see this in all of our challenges, all of the adversities that we face. We can see it in a positive light and also face it with a smile. I think that is what this training, what this practice is about, what it really amounts to. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Venerable Hui Ze, for this insightful Dharma sharing. And thank you to everyone for all your questions. Now I would like to invite Venerable Miao Zhang for closing remarks and dedication of merits.
Okay, thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Venerable Hui Ze. First of all, I would like to apologize to everyone. At the very beginning, we had some technical challenges, but thanks to Shilai Temple, we managed to solve it and have everyone into this wonderful Dharma session together. And of course, when Venerable Hui Ze shared with us on Buddhism, medicine, and health, we hope that when we practice the Buddha's teaching, especially the Four Noble Truths, we can practice more of self-compassion and, of course, self-discipline. And lastly, with the constant self-awareness, we can cope with physical challenges, as well as how we mentally encourage ourselves in fully recovering from whatever that we're experiencing. So I would like to thank Venerable Hui Ze again for this insightful sharing. And we have also put in the small booklet that Venerable Hui Ze has mentioned, from our Fuguangshan International Translation Center, the ebook that talks about Buddhism, medicine, and health by Venerable Master Xing Yun. Yeah, so I would like to thank everyone again for everything, for coming together once every month. We actually have in the audience, we have someone from South Africa, we have someone from China, of course, the Philippines, Indonesia, of course, from the whole United States. Yeah, I didn't have the opportunity to say hi to everyone earlier, but thank you again from being so supportive with our TBIF lecture. So since Venerable Hui Ze has lead the prayer, so I will skip the dedication merit. Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you. Venerable, one quick question. Would you like for everyone to take a photo, or would you like to do a photo up right now?
Sure. We can do it now.
All right. So I'm going to go to the first one. Everyone, please smile. Second page. If you could show your video for me, thank you. All right. Thank you so much for that. One last announcement that I have to share with everyone is our next TBIF will be August 26th, and it will be with Venerable Hui Ze from down under Australia, Untitled Temple. The topic will be dueling and cultivation. It will be a fun topic. Thank you so much for this time.
And thank you, everyone. Hopefully,
you.
We'll see you in Shilai Temple as well. Everyone is welcome to visit us. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Bye. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend.